Okay, imagine this: you're a kid, right? Just trying to figure out life, play with your toys, maybe deal with school stress. But what if I told you that some of the stress you experience before you're even a teenager could physically alter your brain in ways that make you more vulnerable to anxiety, depression, or even physical health issues decades later? And not just in some abstract, "Oh, maybe this could happen" way, but through a concrete biological process that scientists have now mapped out. That's what a shocking new study from Washington University and Princeton is revealing. And honestly, this isn't just another "stress is bad" headline, it's a paradigm shift. Let me explain why this research feels like a breakthrough we've been waiting for, and why it should terrify us into action. So here's the core finding: childhood trauma doesn't just leave psychological scars. It actually modifies how your brain cells package DNA. Think of DNA like a slinky toy. Normally, parts of it stay coiled tight so genes aren't constantly active. But when trauma hits early in life, specific enzymes go haywire, like a kid yanking that slinky until it stretches out. Once stretched, certain genes related to stress response become hyper-accessible. It's like leaving your brain's emergency alarm system on high alert. Even decades later, minor stressors can trigger disproportionate reactions. Personally, I think this changes everything about how we understand mental health. This isn't about weakness or personality flaws, it's literal cellular rewiring. Let's unpack that slinky analogy because it's brilliant. The enzyme acetd7 acts like a molecular wrench, attaching chemical tags that determine how tightly DNA coils. In stressed mice, acetd7 went into overdrive, creating this stretched-out DNA configuration. What blew my mind? When researchers artificially increased acetd7 in unstressed mice, those mice still developed hypersensitive stress responses. That means this enzyme alone is a kind of master switch. But here's what keeps me up at night: this process happens in dopamine neurons, the brain's reward system architects. So we're not just talking about anxiety. We're talking about how people experience joy, motivation, and resilience being fundamentally altered at a cellular level. In my opinion, this explains why childhood trauma survivors often struggle with addiction, chronic apathy, or relationship issues way more than just anxiety disorders. Now let's get controversial. The study showed that blocking acetd7 prevented these DNA changes even after trauma exposure. That sounds like a sci-fi drug commercial waiting to happen. But here's the deeper implication: if we can target this specific mechanism, why are we still treating mental health crises with 50-year-old antidepressants? This raises a bigger question about our societal priorities. We're talking about a biological process that affects over half of the global population, yet funding for childhood trauma prevention remains a rounding error in most healthcare budgets. What this study proves is that early intervention isn't just nice to have. It's a biological necessity. The slinky metaphor works both ways. Once DNA structure locks into that stretched position, how much harder does that make treatment later? But wait, let's not get too excited about a magic pill. What fascinated me most wasn't the enzyme itself, but the window of vulnerability they discovered. This isn't about permanent damage, it's about critical developmental periods. When they blocked acetd7 after trauma exposure, mice remained resilient. That gives me hope. From my perspective, this should revolutionize how we approach foster care, school counseling, or even pediatric checkups. Imagine if every child in a high-risk environment got epigenetic screening or preventive therapy? We're not talking about erasing the past. We're talking about protecting future brain development. The real story here is prevention, not cure. So what's the bigger picture? This research shatters the false divide between mental and physical health. Your childhood experiences literally reshape cellular machinery in ways we can now measure. But here's the uncomfortable truth: we've known for decades that trauma has lifelong consequences. What changed? We finally have a biological marker that makes it undeniable. And that brings us to the ethical question I can't stop thinking about. If childhood trauma leaves these physical scars, does society have a responsibility to treat early stress prevention like a public health crisis? Because honestly, When over 50% of kids are exposed to these stressors, we're not talking about individual failure. We're talking about a global epidemic hiding in plain sight. What if the next generation's mental health crisis isn't just about smartphones or social media, but about millions of stretched out DNA slinkies waiting for the next big earthquake?